In the legal world, there is a combination of forces that feed a corrupt and suffocating legal system for attorneys. Law schools, law professionals, judges, and even the firms themselves for whom you work create a system, a matrix, if you will, that is nothing like what you thought when you passed the bar exam. The purpose of this podcast is to help you escape this legal matrix, leading you out of the proverbial desert to be free of the bondage of the matrix. Hosted by Bryce D. Nyer, attorney at law with over 30 years experience in the trenches of civil and criminal litigation at the state, federal, and international levels. He's a highly accomplished and resourceful legal professional, a true master of his craft, and he's here to help you get your life back. Here's your host, Bryce D. Nyer.
All right. We've got another episode of Escape the Legal Matrix. That's right, with yours truly, Bryce D. Nyer, coming at you live from Fayetteville, North Carolina, home of Fort Bragg, where every day men and women do what? Don the uniform and go wage war and preserve the very rights and freedoms we so often take for granted. All right, so I hope everybody's doing well out there, but we've got a great topic tonight. It's real, raw, and relevant, and actually very relevant to what's going on in my professional and personal life as well. So tonight's episode is, hey, don't get mad, get strategic. Yeah, exactly. Look, here's the deal. Since the beginning and the creation of man in the Garden of Eden, man and woman, well, you know what happened there. So people fell into original sin, got a little bit tempted, and then all hell broke loose in the world. And ultimately, there was Cain and Abel, one killing the other. Murder. So murder and mayhem followed after the fall of Eden in the garden. And what you're going to find in life personally and professionally is that people can be really crappy to you, crappy to others. And you're gonna get angry. You're gonna get pissed. You're gonna get mad, and completely understandably so, because we are all human. So I see this a lot, and have seen this quite a bit in litigation. You spend a long enough time in hostile litigation, mainly like in family law cases. People just hate each other. One time they loved one another, and then the next, oh man, love just went right out the door. Elvis just didn't leave the building. All the passion, love went with him. So, you see this a lot in the world. You see it in litigation. You see it in your world today, where people are just angry all the time, and people get taken for granted. People are mistreated, and then people just they go into rage. Well, I want you to take a different phraseology of this, because even this week, I had to take a different phraseology. I'm gonna tell you, I was pissed. I was angry. With some of the opposing attorneys I had to deal with. I mean, they were just acting absolutely dumb, stupid, and anal, and they were. And I'm like, I had to take a step back, and I said, you know what? Don't get pissed. Don't get angry. Just get strategic. And it is something that I have employed and deployed during my career. I mean, let's think about it. Think about this for a minute. For example, when real professional hackers hack into people's computers, servers, whatever, the best ones are the ones that you don't even know that they've been there. Because the great hackers, you'll never even know they're there. You just won't. So it's the same thing when you're dealing with difficult people that are anal stupid. I probably should be thrown off an airplane above the Atlantic Ocean or dropped off in some country that we don't like. I could name a few right now today. But anyway, the key thing is I thought, you know what? I'm not going to get pissed. I'm not going to waste my energy being pissed. I'm just going to get strategic, and I'm going to come up with a solution to the problem to work around the enemy, so to speak. Because you can sit there and bump up against a wall all day long, and that's not going to get you to where you need to be. And it kind of goes back to, like going back to World War II. I mean, let's think about this. A strategy, when Eisenhower had to make that decision about when to go in on D-Day. Was it going to be June the 5th or June the 6th? It went on June the 6th because the weather sucked on June the 5th. And so, but he had an overall end game, an overall strategy. And yeah, they had to storm the beaches. I get all that. But at the same time, he was strategic the night before with the insertion of paratroopers, behind the lines, had, coordinated with the French resistance and others. I mean, there was actually a lot of other coordination that went on. In addition, they had like a fake rubber army in England that looked like real tanks and vehicles, looked like a buildup, as if they were going to go into Calais, a different section of France. But the point I'm making is that instead of General Eisenhower getting pissed, he got strategic. And the reality is, when you're wrapped up in the legal matrix, when you're wrapped up in this legal system, when you're wrapped up in this legal profession, when you're wrapped up in your personal problems, when you're wrapped up in other insanity going on in your life, it's going to be natural just to lash out and be angry. But what you got to do is maybe take a few steps back and sit down and come up with a plan to work around it. I'll give you an example. So most of the time when you are litigating in the opposing counsel and you have differing views, you know what? I just don't argue with the attorney anymore. I'm not going to argue with him. I'm not going to waste my breath anymore trying to convince them that our position is the correct one, because most of the time they're so locked into their position or their client's absurd position, you can't talk to them. So you know what? I don't have to convince them. Who I have to convince is either the judge in a bench trial or the jury in a jury trial. It's irrelevant. I don't care what the other attorney thinks. I don't give a damn. I don't care. Matters not to me, because they're not your constituency. So strategically, I'm wasting my time a lot of the times trying to deal with some of the opposing counsel. Now, there are some that are reasonable and you can talk, and they might go back to client and say, look, you need to do A, B, and C, and our position is kind of weak, or you need to rethink this. But that's few and far between. It doesn't happen, to be honest, very often. Not in today's world with attorneys. It just doesn't, especially in the area of family law. So I'm like, you know what? My strategy is I'm not going to sit here and waste my time arguing with you, because I'm probably going to want to put a screwdriver right through your eyeball socket. Can't do that. And that's not good. That won't solve anything except a quick orange suit down to the jail. But sometimes I do feel that way. I know, just in my head, but I get over it like kind of quickly. But saying that, I'm just like, you got to know who your constituency is. You just do. You got to be strategic. You have to run your personal and your professional life as if you're running for a presidential election. Now, again, I don't care whether you like any of the candidates or past or present presidents or not. What I will state is, when I watched former President Obama's campaign, and of course I watched President Trump's campaign, and I watched Reagan's campaign, regardless of how you feel about them politically or individually, those three presidents had a particular strategy. They had a strategy. And their strategy was, they weren't, so much, angry. Well, maybe President Trump is. I can't blame him. But, they thought about, how can I connect? What is my strategic seduction to convince people to vote for me so that the electoral college votes give me enough to get over 270, so I am elected as President of the United States. And it's the same thing that you see in Fortune 500 companies that have made it. They could be angry about the competitor, this, that, and the other, but the point is that they get strategic. How can they better connect with their clientele, their customers? So instead of getting angry, they channel their energies into developing that strategy. And in the real world of litigation, like if you're a party to an action, or you're a criminal defendant, or you're an attorney representing people in civil or criminal, you have to really start changing that phraseology. You have to start thinking strategically, because sometimes you're going up against a solid mountain that you're not going to be able to break through, and you got to figure a way over it or around it or under it if you can go under it. It's, for example, even with judges, you're not going to win a direct confrontation with a judge. You piss a judge off and they're going to shut you down. What you have to figure out is, okay, I have a very difficult situation, a very difficult judge. This is an example. And I have to figure a way to convince this judge to see it this way. So you're going to have to change your tone of voice. You're going to have to change your tone of presentation. You're going to have to take a totally different phraseology and a different strategy. Going head on with everybody all the time is not always going to be the solution. Now, don't get me wrong. There are going to be times and circumstances when you're going to be left with no choice. There's no quarter given, and you're just going to have to go all out war. They leave you with no other option, and that can happen. And if you find yourself in that situation, then you got to do what you got to do. And you just got to wage holy war. That's what you got to do. And that has happened in my career where, we attempted to deploy a strategy, but the other side was so insane. They were so anal and stupid that they were just living in delusion and deception. And there was just only one thing to do. And that's it. That's it. Lock, load, draw sabers, whatever, and move forward, drive forward, damn the torpedoes, and just go to war. That's it. That's it. But in most of the other circumstances, you don't have to get mad. You can get strategic. And that's the way you have to think about it. I've been talking to, some potential clients today. And when I talk to most of my consults and potential clients or current clients, active clients, we talk about the strategy. A lot of times you're going to get questions. People say, I just want to be done with this. What can I do to just be done? I want to be done, D-O-N-E, done. And I'm like, okay, well, we got to change the way we think about things. You got to ask yourself, what do you want? Because once you answer what you want, everything else is irrelevant because what you don't want goes off the table anyway. So there's a method to this madness of don't get mad, get strategic. And that's going to be, that's critical. It's critical thinking. That's using the brain that God gave you and put in your head to look at a situation, look at the problem, solve the problem. What's the best way to move on down the road? Because sometimes certain battles are not worth fighting. You have to conserve and preserve your time, your energy, and your resources to come back another day in order to win the overall war. Some, small battles, may help you gain ground. But if it's not going to ultimately help you win the war, then you got to back up, you got to back off, and you got to rethink and you got to re-strategize how you're going to deal with the opposition. How you're going to deal with it. Just like in the domains of body, being, balance, and business. How are you going to face the obstacle that you're not fit in your relationship with God and being? How are you going to correct that relationship if you're out sinning or you're not heeding the word? Okay, how are you going to do that? And the issue of balance, like with your spouse, or your siblings or your parents or whoever it is, what is the strategy you're going to use to solidify those close relationships? And in business, man, there's a big one. That's definitely strategic because the market is always changing. So you have to figure out what is the best way in business to continue to hook clients, to continue to convince them to hire you. And in any negotiations that you do, whether it's business law, I don't care what it is. You have to have the strategy. But if you walk around a lot being pissed and angry and mad, it's going to cloud your judgment. And some days it's hard not to be mad. There are days when I just have, I'm just beside myself sometimes. And I'm just so irritated and I'm just so pissed. And I have to get up and I got to walk out and I got to go drive somewhere or take a walk. Or in the morning, I get up early, go to the gym and, work out. And I always feel better, after I work out. And then take a shower and then just listen to some music, meditation music, and just chill the hell out. And in my head, when it's totally quiet, consider the strategy. Then I email the strategy to myself about what I'm going to do to handle the particular obstacle that I'm going to face that day. In fact, that happened this morning. I awakened about 3 and I'm like, okay, I'd already worked out yesterday. So today was a non-workout day. So I just kind of chilled and I thought, I got some real obstacles here in two of the 3 cases I have. How am I going to overcome the obstacles that I'm clearly facing? And so I came up with a strategy, how I would deal with the council, how I would deal with the court. And today it worked. So I was a little bit irritated over some of the stuff, before, but then it turned out okay because I changed the phraseology. I changed the strategy of how I was going to deal with the other side. So the moral of the story is, again, don't get mad, get strategic. That is going to be critical to everything you do. And, when you're human and people make you angry and people do stupid stuff to you, I get it. I really do. I mean, I get it. The only thing you can think of is like, I would just like to take this person and just like, throw them in a pit of crocodiles, or make them listen to political speeches in a room for like 7 days and 24 hours a day of the most boring political speeches. I can think of a few politicians that would drive anybody insane. So, I shouldn't be thinking these things. I don't know what's wrong with me this session. But anyway, so listen, ask the better question. Where in your world, where in the domains of body, being, balance, and business do you need to get strategic and stop being angry, stop being mad? Because it's a hard thing to do. But if you can answer that better question for all the domains, then ultimately you're going to get to fulfillment. So ask that better question. Think about it. Write it down. And again, don't get mad, get strategic. All right. It's been another great episode of Escape the Legal Matrix. This is yours truly. Again, Bryce D. Nair coming at you from where? Say it. Fayetteville, home of Fort Bragg. It's no longer Fort Liberty. Nope. It is Fort Bragg. Where again, every day, the men and women of our armed forces, they go out, wage war against our enemies that would do us harm. And a lot of times we take these freedoms for granted. But we shouldn't do that. All right. This is Bryce D. Nair, and I am out of here.